and welcome back to my little channel, Soft Spoken ASMR. Today, I thought we would do something a little bit different. I thought I would show you one of my favorite books, which is the Encyclopedia of Ancient Myths and Cultures. And it is, as you can see, quite a substantial book, very weighty and quite thorough, and it covers several ancient mythologies and cultures, and it is a well-read and well-loved book here in my household. Got to see, as you can see here, unfortunately, it broke here a little bit, but the words are still on the page, so we can still read everything in it. And then I will let you know some of the different cultures and myths that it covers, one of which is Greek mythology. Then you also have Chinese mythology. The next is Indian mythology. And then we have Japanese mythology, Celtic mythology, Viking mythology. Over here is Egyptology, and finally the Romans. And I spent a little time going back and forth wondering which would be best to read about today, to cover, and it came down to the Celts or the Vikings, and I decided to go with the Vikings. I thought that might be a little something different. I feel like the Celts always get a lot of representation, and here I thought maybe we would go with the Vikings. And yeah, let's see what is written about the wonderful Vikings in this massive book of mine. All right, let's find the corresponding page. And this book really has wonderful illustrations and photos of art, and yeah, it's a really wonderful book. Let's find the appropriate page, which is page 374. Really, the Japanese and the Chinese mythology is amazing as well. Nearly there. Here we're going through the Celts. Alright, nearly there, 371, which is the tail end of the Celts. And here we are, and we've arrived at the Viking mythology, as you can see here. And yeah, we should get started on that. Let me just I have a lovely cup of coffee here, just to have a little drink if I need it. Oh, that's lovely. Can't beat a nice cup of coffee, although it is quite hot today, but still. And then in order to read about the Vikings, I will need my glasses. And let me grab a little pencil, just so I don't lose my place, hopefully. And it starts off with an introduction about the Vikings. I did pre-read a little bit, and there are some words I think I might not be able to say on YouTube. I think you get censored or something like that. So I might just say another word or just skip the word, and I'm sure everyone can figure out what they mean. Just remember, it's the Vikings, and there was a lot of shenanigans and malarkey going on during this time, so we'll get started here. All right, start with the introduction. Viking mythology is Norse mythology, and Norse mythology is in turn the best recorded version of Teutonic mythology. It seems fitting that the main records we have of the Viking myths come from an outpost, Iceland. The Vikings were a Teutonic people who established themselves in Scandinavia between the late 8th century and the middle of the 11th century. They were characterized by a mixture of great chivalry and barbaric cruelty. They pillaged the eastern coastline of mainland Britain. Men and children, women, who were then in their turn. The methods of peasant fisherfolk were disgusting, but then we have to remember that this was a fairly disgusting age. Around this time, the Galwegian warriors on the west of Scotland were enjoying the sport of hurting children. Oh, that's terrible. The difference between the Vikings and such savages as the Galwegians was that the former had built up for themselves some kind of philosophical construct to account for their actions. Their mythology gave them a way whereby they could justify the most bestial behavior. Their gods dictated that men should be almost inhumanly brave in death, and so it was a token of respect to a defeated foe to give him the maximum latitude to display his bravery. In this respect, the Vikings did, though, show a great deal of honesty. Should one of their number be submitted to a similar end, it was expected of him that he should bear them without undue complaint, and should bear no grudge into the afterlife against his tormentors. The whole ethical system bears a great resemblance to that of the school playground, except that the bullies, the Vikings, were encouraged rather than discouraged by their teachers, the gods, in their acts of brutality. At first sight, it seems that there is very little to recommend the Viking people. Their civilization was based on war, looting, aggression, and other crimes. That makes the average modern human being blench. The truth was, though, that these crimes made most of their members of the Viking culture blench too. They were content that the warriors should travel far afield to bother distant lands. After all, if innocents are going to be hurt, your priorities are that you shouldn't be one of them, and that the persecution should be happening as far away as possible, so that you have no direct experience of it. However, even the most warlike of the Vikings did pay lip service to an ethical system. Most of the tenets of this system bore little resemblance to the modern commandments. In one poem, Odin gives advice about how not to be cheated or to do self-evidently stupid things. For our "thou shalt not commit adultery," for example, we have Odin's advice that adultery is all right as long as you don't get caught by the jealous spouse, and as long as you don't whisper any dangerous secrets into the ear of your lover in a moment of passion. But however much we may have doubts about this ethical code, we have to acknowledge that it was there. The contemporaneous Celts seem to have had a much more righteous scheme of ethical behavior, but they could be equally cruel. The Christian peoples, whose own mythology affected that of the Vikings, had a far more benign system of ethics, yet used it as a justification to burn or hurt people. Greek morality, never too delectable in the first place, was perverted by the Romans into an ethical system so repulsive that words fail us. In And so we return to the Vikings. They lived in lands which we were not particularly hospitable to life. The summers were short and the winters long, and always the glaciers in the north seemed threatening. They tried to explain the things they saw around them. The crashing of thunder must be Thor throwing his mighty hammer. Mjolnir at the frost giants. The cracking of the glaciers must be the cries of the frost giants themselves. The rainbow must surely be a bridge between the land of the gods and the land of the mortals. It is hard to assess the overall impact of the Vikings on our modern culture. At best, it was minimal. However, the mythology which the Norse people have left us, even if in only the most fragmented form, has had a powerful effect on our imaginations. J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings owes a great deal to it. Then there is Alan Garner's The Weirdstone of Brisingman. Jack Yowell's long story, The Ignorant Armies, is based very directly on the legend of Valhalla. My own series of novels, The Legends of Lone Wolf, written in conjunction with Joe Dever, draw extensively on the Viking mythology, and in doing so are typical of the genre called Viking fantasy. The list of modern fiction based on Norse mythology is long. In this book, I have attempted to tell all of the significant tales. The overall chronology of the mythology is problematical, the details of many of the legends equally so. I have attempted to make the whole system of stories as self-consistent as possible, although I've pointed out instances where the task has proved completely impossible. I am reassured by the fact that every other writer on the subject has found similar difficulties. Viking mythology is not a single continuous story. Instead, it is a set of stories, many of them very good ones, that relate to each other only with difficulty. And here we have some different depictions of Viking mythology. I believe it's art. This is a Danish bronze plaque of a horse dating from about 400 to 800 AD. Here we have a Norwegian plate in gold from the 5th century. And down here is a 12th century guild panel from Jutland, to show the baptism around 960 of the Viking king Harald Bluetooth. And then over here is a 5th century horn god in gold from Gallius in Denmark. I'm going to lift it up a bit like this. Maybe you can see it. Here it is. And here is just an excavation. This is a skeleton and some rings, and I believe there's a sword. And that is a Danish Iron Age grave of a woman. The large silver brooch bears a inscription. The silver coin near to the necklace is the coin to pay for entry into the afterlife. Here we have a guide to gods and goddesses and others. Norse mythology is very complex, and its surviving sources are not always as clear as they could be. Some people may therefore disagree with the way in which, in this chapter, I've classified the various important figures from the legend. One person's mortal could be another person's god, or giant, or dwarf. So this lists all the different gods and goddesses that they had in Viking mythology, which is quite a lot. Wow, let's see. Oh wow, it's still going. Giants and giantesses. It's interesting how some of these myths see dwarves. There was a TV show, I believe, on HBO. I forgot what it's called. Game of Thrones, I think, is that what it is? Almost a little bit like this as well. Valkyries, other proper names. Interesting. I could definitely read some of them, or you can read them together. I mean, definitely won't read all of them. This is quite a lot. Let's see. I could go on to some actual text here. Let me see. We can cross-reference later if we feel like it with maybe some of the gods that get mentioned in the text, and then we can come back and look them up and maybe go into detail about some of the gods. Now here is chapter 2, the creation. In the beginning there was nothing. No, not quite nothing. There was an endless space and a God called All-Father, often confusingly identified with Odin, who was invisible and who had existed forever. He had 11 other names, ranging from spear shaker to gelding to ruler of weather. The huge abyss of emptiness was called Ginnungagap. Long before the earth was created, there came to exist Yggdrasil, Trasil, the world tree, an ash that would link all of the 9 worlds. Under one of its roots to the south, there was a realm called Muspel, which was so hot that anyone who did not live there would be consumed by the heat. It was guarded by a giant called Surt, who was armed with a burning sword. This was a place of fire. Embers from it floated down into Ginnungagap. Under another root, to the north, there was a realm called Nilfheim, a land of mist and darkness. Directly beneath this great root was Helgemir, a bubbling cauldron that supplied the waters for 12 huge rivers. In the cauldron, there was also a repellent dragon called Nidhogg that gnawed away at the roots of the great tree. When it and its worm-like allies succeed in killing the tree, the world will come to an end. The waters of the rivers pour from Havglamir, flowed torrentially into Ginnungagap, and as they fell into the frigid void, became great blocks of ice. Far down at the base of Ginnungagap, the embers from Muspel dropped onto these piles of ice so that great clouds of steam arose. The steam turned into rime, which progressively filled up Ginnungagap. To the north, near Niflheim, there were gales and a never-ending drizzle of cold rain. To the south, near Muspel, the glowing embers lit up the sky as they met the ascending rime. The result was that the center of the rising surface became a temperate ocean. This was incarnated in the form of an evil giant called Gymir, the first of the ice giants. The thawing of the rime created also a cow, Audhumla. Her udder gave out 4 streams of milk, and from these Ymir was able to gain sustenance. The cow licked blocks of salty ice, so that on the first day the hair of a being appeared. Her licking on the second day revealed the head of the being. Her licking on the third exposed the entire body of this being, Buri. In the meantime, Ymir had been sleeping, and he slept, and as he slept, he sweated. From the sweat of his left armpit were born the first man and the first woman. Ymir's legs produced a six-headed giant called Thrudglimir, who in due course gave birth to Berglimir, the direct ancestor of the frost giants. Buri became the forefather of the gods. He had a son, Bur, and the two of them immediately began to battle against the evil giants. The battle lasted for a longer time than human beings can reckon, but then Bur married a giantess called Bestla and sired three great sons, Odin, Vili, and Ve. These three leapt into battle alongside their father, so that soon Ymir was slain. All the giants were drowned in the flood of Ymir's blood, except Berglimir and his mate. These two fled in a longship to a place called Jotunheim, where they bred. The frost giants who descended from Berglimir and his wife perhaps understandably regarded the gods ever after as their natural foes, even though on occasion members of the two factions would exhibit amity. Odin, Vili, and Ve were left with Ymir's corpse, presumably wondering what to do with it. They tugged it out across Gennegabrok and started to get rid of it, make the various parts physical of the physical world. Our world of mortals, Midgard, they manufactured from Ymir's flesh, the giant's blood they used for the ocean, and his unbroken bones for the mountains. His broken bones and bits of his jaw became the cliffs, rocks, and stones of the world. His skull they made onto the dome of the sky to keep it aloft. They created four dwarfs, Austri, Nordri, Sudri, and Westri, corresponding to the four cardinal points who supported it. His brain became the clouds. They used the embers from Muspel to create the light that illuminated both heaven and earth and the earth. He also made the stars and the planets. The three gods then created the first human beings. Out of a pair of trees they discovered. Odin's contributions to these people were life and spirit, Vili's mobility and intelligence, and Ve's senses. The first man was called Ask, meaning ash tree, and the first woman Embla, meaning possibly elm, right in the middle of what had now become the world the gods built Asgard. The gods are still living there, and will do so until Ragnarok. The brightest of the embers from Muspel were given special names and special prominence. They were the moon, Mani, and the sun, Sol. These two beings were set by the three gods into chariots that were designed to cross the sky. An alternative version is that the moon and sun were the son and daughter, respectively, of a man called Mutlifari. Sun's husband was a man named Glen or Glaur. The gods were outraged by Mutlifari's impertinence in calling his children by the names of the heavenly lights they had created, and so snatched away the gleaming children to drive the chariots to the moon and the sun. It is these children that we see as bright lights in the sky. The two horses drawing Sol's chariot, Arkvar and Alsvin, had to be protected from Sol's great heat. They were endowed with cooling devices, plus the shielding of another device called Svalin. The horse that drew Mani's chariot was called Alsvar. Mani had 2 attendants, children he got from the ground while they were collecting water from a well. They were called Huki and Bill, and represented the waxing and waning moon. A giant called Norvi had a daughter called Not, or Night. She in turn had children by 3 husbands. Aud was her son by her first husband. Naglfari Fjörgen was her daughter by her second husband. Anar, Dag, an astoundingly beautiful and radiant youth, was her son by her third husband, Dellinger, the god of dawn. Retaliation of Odin, Vili, and Ve. A relation of Odin, Vili, and Ve. These 3 gods gave Not a chariot in which she could circle the heavens. It was drawn by the horse called Hrumfaxi. Later, they saw the beauty of Dag. They gave him a chariot as well. Its horse was Skinfaxi. The mane of Skinfaxi gives off a brilliant light which serves to illuminate the world. Mani precedes Sol across the sky, but Sol is always in a hurry to catch up. This is because Sol is being pursued by a wolf called Skur. Mani is likewise being chased by a wolf, Hati. From time to time, the wolves succeed in catching their prey, so that the light of the sun or the moon is blotted out. However, people on earth can make enough noise to scare the wolves away and restore the light. In the end, though, just before Ragnarok, the wolves will finally triumph. It continues on this page. I will finish this first chapter, but take just a little sip to drink here. All right. So we will continue with this chapter. And the gods appointed various other guardians. The responsibility for changing of the season was divided between winter and summer. Winter was the grandson of the god Vasud, the frigid wind, and the son of Vindvald, neither of whom were the sort of progenitor you'd particularly want to meet up a dark alley. Winter took on their nastier characteristics, and therefore unreasoningly loathed summer, who was the son of a benign and lovely god called Svasud. Less important guardians of the regularity of passing time were noon, afternoon, evening, midnight, morning, and forenoon. The 3 original gods had something of a problem. While they had been reducing Ymir's body to its constituent parts, they noticed that the flesh of the giant's body had been crawling with maggots. The gods decided to be merciful to these creatures. They gave them a subhuman form, the nature of which depended upon their spiritual characteristics. Those whose ethics were questionable became dwarves. They were condemned to live underground, knowing that if they came out into the open during the day, they would be instantly turned to stone. Dwarves could also be called dark elves, gnomes, kobolds, or trolls. Whatever the name, they were banished to Svartalfheim. The maggots that were considered ideologically sound became fairies and light elves. They had a much better time of it, being given the lovely realm of Alfheim, which was halfway between heaven and earth. From here, they could flit down to earth whenever they wanted. Neither of these two classes of being could be considered as human. Normally, they were deadly enemies, but on occasion, they could be friendly towards mortals or gods. The gods then created their own realm, Asgard, and the realm of mortals, Midgard. All of the worlds were still connected by the trunk of the great ash tree, Yggdrasil, whose roots lay in Asgard, Jotunheim, and Nilfheim. Its topmost bough, Liard, had perched on it an eagle between whose eyes sat a hog called Vedfolnir. It was the duty of Vedfolnir to look down over all of heaven, earth, and Nilfheim and report what was happening there. Yggdrasil had other infesting fauna, aside from Nidhogg chewing at the tree's roots. There were the 4 deer, Dane, Dunir, Duhattor, and Dvalin, that roamed among its branches. The dew dripping from their antlers came together to form the world's rivers. Then there was a squirrel called Ratatosk. It spent its time running up and down the great tree's trunk, exchanging malicious gossip between the eagle and the dragon, hoping to make them declare war on each other. The Norns had the daily task of sprinkling water from a blessed well called Urdar down over the branches of Yggdrasil, so that the great tree was constantly refreshed. The water falling from the lower branches became bees' honey. The family of gods, sired by Odin and his brothers, was called Aesir. But there was also another family of older gods, the Vanir fertility gods, whose powers were generally related to those of the wind and the sea. They lived in Vanaheim. Very early on, there was a war between the Aesir and the Vanir. The result was a stalemate, and so hostages were exchanged. The Vanir sent Njord to Asgard with his 2 children, Frey and Freya, and the Aesir sent Mimir and Hunir, a brother of Odin, to Vanaheim. This disposition of gods seems to have suited everybody because Frey and Freya became important members of the Norse pantheon, while Hunir will be one of the very few lucky enough to survive Ragnarok. And here is a description of Asgard. I'll cover that, and then Asgard was the home of the gods. It was built by Odin and the other gods and goddesses in the very early days. Mortals were unable to see this realm because the plane on which it was sited, Idavold, floated far above the earth. A river called Ifing separated Idavold from the rest of the world. Its waters were distinguished by the fact that they never froze. However, there was a link between our mortal earth and Asgard, the magical bridge called Bifrost, which be equated with the rainbow. Its colors were born of fire, water, and the air. The gods were able to use this bridge to travel up and down, up from and down to Midgard, the world of human beings. One difficulty the gods faced was that their weight might shatter Bifrost, the god. Thor therefore eschewed the bridge altogether, while the others trod wearily. At the Midgard end of the bridge stood the god Heimdall, clutching a horn. Every time the gods entered or left Asgard, Heimdall would sound a quiet note on this instrument. When Ragnarok happens, he'll sound a loud and savage blast to signify the end of the world. Asgard was furnished with several halls belonging to the major gods and goddesses. Freya's hall, for example, was called Folkvang. Forseti's was Glitnir. Gladsheim was one of Odin's halls, and was equipped with 12 thrones, where the major gods sat in council. Another feature of Asgard was Hildingsfall, the great throne of Odin. From there, the great god, or Frigga, because she was allowed to sit on Hilgalf as well, could see everything that was happening in all of the worlds. And that was the beginning of the first chapter, or two really, because the next is chapter 3, and it says Tales of Gods and Goddesses. But I will save that for next time. I actually find this really interesting, and yeah, maybe you do as well. If you do, please let me know in the comments if you've lasted this long, and I will continue reading the book, and we'll see what the Vikings are up to. I will put my handy dandy little marker right here, and we will continue another time. Always have to try to find a quiet time in the house to film this. But yeah, I had a good time reading with you. I hope to see you soon. I hope you have a lovely day, a lovely evening, a lovely night, and hopefully we will see each other soon.